All right, we're back again. Um, Please just let us just hear a little bit. We just want to pick your brain a little bit on what prompted you or what made you package the book Reborn. Is this your first
Yeah,
book, by the
so
way?
yes, it's my first book.
Okay.
Um, so when I was a kid, my dad was very interested in different religions from around the world. He asked me to draw a depiction of as
Mm,
many
mm,
religious figures, deities as I could in some epic conflict.
mm,
I was a drawer back then. I wanted to be an animator when I was a kid for
mm.
Disney or something like that, DreamWorks. But I didn't. I hit a plateau, so I didn't think I could draw that. But
Okay.
after college, when I was in graduate school, it just kind of hit me to maybe I could write it. I could write some kind of epic that dealt with I'd say obviously pre-Abrahamic religions or outside Abrahamic religions. But
Mm,
this
mm.
book is special in that it does have the Abrahamic religions in the world
Okay.
of Reborn.
Mm, mm,
And so, if you are a Christian or a Muslim or a Jewish person,
mm,
you will enjoy this book because you will see the themes and the characteristics and kind of the polemics of your religion
mm,
discussed in the book at
mm,
length.
mm.
And it's an interesting discussion, right? I think Reborn, when I started writing it, I really wanted it to be a conversation more than just a fantasy novel. I
Okay.
wanted it to
Okay.
be something where people could get an education in the kind of philosophies behind each kind of deity as a metaphor, right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
When we look at the Abrahamic religions, we don't look at it as metaphor. We still look at it as literal truth. But with the myths, like
Yes.
Zeus or uh, even someone like Shango or Osiris, Horus, these are gods that we tend to look at more in a metaphorical sense, the
Mm,
symbolic power behind them,
correct.
right?
Mm.
And I think that relates to our conversation last time. Like we're talking about political will.
Yes. Yes.
We're
Correct.
talking about what is going to motivate post-colonial Africa. And
Mm,
I think a look at pre-colonial dispositions and beliefs could empower people in a way that complements what they already believe today. I don't, I've talked to a lot of people. I have a good amount of Nigerian friends, some Ghanaian friends too, and they talk about, oh, we shudder around some of the beliefs from before the British came or before the French came. And for me, it's like, why? Why let the British or the French tell you what to believe or how you should subscribe to your own system of empowerment?
yeah. The other. So what? Which one? Where does it fit? In which genre does the book fit? Uh,
This is a YA fantasy novel.
oh, fantasy novel. Okay.
Yeah.
Up till now, the assumption for almost everyone is that mythology is obviously made up and fake.
Right. Right.
But I realized recently that it is a depiction of actual reality of
Mm,
certain spiritual entities or deities that people didn't realize actually existed or exist.
mm.
So yeah, so it's very interesting that you took that angle, and I'd really like to understand also obviously two things, which comes to my second question, which is how do you draw from mythology and spirituality in your writing?
Yeah, so I grew up in the church when I was initially a kid. I was in a Protestant church. And what I learned about spirituality and mythology from at least that perspective
Mm,
was the power of writing, the power of literacy, the power of a book,
mm,
right? What separates the Greek mythology from Christianity or Judaism or Islam is that it's not a thing of a book. If they had scriptures, if they had books on their religion, we don't know where they are and we can't find them. So it's kind of dead in that way.
mm,
But what's interesting is that these are not God, big G, right? Uh, as in a creator that creates the universe. These are beings that live within a set of rules
mm,
and
mm,
within a context. And I find that interesting because they're like people, right? I mean, human beings are not too different than how Zeus may act as a father to his child, or as Hera may act to us as a scorned wife,
mm, mm,
right?
mm,
They are the passion play. They are the depiction of some of the best and worst of humanity in a theater that is safe to have that discussion.
mm, 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 mm.
So if I can repeat myself, what I'm saying to clarify is that life is the gods of old are in stories. They're in anecdotes. They're
Mm.
in little poems sometimes, or things that can help us. The oral traditions, right?
Correct, correct.
And the Greeks were not so different than the African in that we had the oral tradition, we had the bard, right? You talk about the Celtic bard,
Mm.
the person that goes town to town telling stories and entertaining people,
Correct. Yeah.
right? Today we need the bard more than ever to clarify some of our biggest questions and
Mm,
some of the things that we really wrestle with on a human level.
mm,
What is the meaning of the good? What does it mean to love someone? What does it mean to hate? What does it mean to do anything? And you can all do that
mm,
by writing and reading a book like this, Reborn, because it is a safe space to do it because people aren't looking at it
mm,
with all
mm,
their hopes and all their dreams, right? When we think about religion, some people do put so much energy,
mm,
so much passion, so much conviction.
mm,
And I'm not making a judgment on that. What I'm saying is that that can kind of lead you to a focus of one path, and there's one right way, and there's one thinking model. But in the world and what globalism has taught us, and the interaction of cultures, is that there's many similarities between different cultures and different peoples.
mm,
And
mm.
my modus operandi is to bring people together, not to have us
Correct.
more.
Mm. Yeah. But what I want to also understand is the fact that are we looking at um when we talk about the whole the whole issue of mythology
Yeah.
and spirituality. Are you coming are you writing this book from the angle of being a spiritual person, a Christian, or where are you in that placement?
Yeah. So
Which religion or yeah, where
I'd
which
say
angle are you coming? Sorry?
my perspective is that of I guess you could say an early Christian Stoic.
Hmm.
I mean I subscribe to Stoicism as a philosophy for life, the philosophy of Seneca and Marcus Aurelius.
Hmm.
That's what helps me the most. Obviously, I've not forgotten many of the tenets of Christianity that I learned when I was a kid, growing up. Uh, Charity, looking for stillness and peace, looking at Jesus as a figure that was brave enough to have conversations with his enemy, right?
Hmm.
To show love to the enemy in a sense that you don't. It's very stoic, like right, like in Christianity they talk about in the Gospels they talk about turning the other cheek, right?
Yes.
And in Stoicism, they say the best thing you can do is not be like the worst person you know, is to not be like your enemy,
Mm.
right? So there's synergies there. Um, I think I come from this. I mean, obviously, the main character's name is Christian. The main
Okay,
character's
yeah,
name is Christian Belvedere.
correct.
So
Yeah.
he is, so you can imagine him as a representative of
The
the
Christian faith.
hero journey,
Oh, okay.
and as as a kind of uh, main character in a religious plot, similar to many religious figures in different religions. You
Okay.
have Buddha, obviously, you have Muhammad, you have Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think what he's trying to do is to talk about and confront his own sanity in this book, as many people try to do in religion, right? I mean, one man's John the Baptist is another man's crazy person, right? You come from a position of revelation.
Correct.
When I was a kid, my favorite book in the Bible to read was Revelations because it was so dramatic, and
Mm-hmm.
it was the clearing out of all falsehoods, right? It is the story, and Jesus talks about in the Gospels. There's what he's telling you, and then there's the higher level. There's the Gnostic.
Correct.
There's
Mm.
the if you keep your mind eye clear, that you will see that how God's kingdom lives in you, and you can be a part of the kingdom to to spread it to where it needs to go.
Correct.
But that is all a dynamic between you and Christ that I think is interesting, that is offered nowhere else. And
Mm,
that happens in this book, right? Christian has to confront many spiritual deities that have been forgotten, that are lonely, that are sad, that are angry, that are bitter, right? These are emotions that you associate with a human being, and it disappoints him at first. In a world where gods are righteous, but he has to make the decision whether to save them from themselves, just obliterate them as many others want to do. And of course, in the end, he chooses, I would say, a Christ-like path, but he
mm,
does it in a way that I think fits a narrative that I was comfortable with
mm.
as someone who is a spiritual person. And I want people to read this and take a positive reaction from it.
Awesome. Yeah. As a Christian, there's obviously we believe um, even when we pastor and we engage with our congregations. Uh, Obviously, when it comes to mythology, I know that as you explained, there's an initial inward introspection and also a spiritual dependence on self-discovery or discovering the spiritual alignment, as they say.
Right.
Yeah. Versus us as believers believe in Jesus Christ coming to us, reconciling us with God, and then depending on Him for that alignment. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
now in your book, I've also seen that there's the issue of how does the virtues of what they call constellation uh, ritual reflect themes of power, control, and destiny, which for us
Yeah.
depend all
Right.
completely on God. But please
Right. Right. Right.
enlighten us. Yeah.
Right. So the word gospel is hyphenated. It
Okay.
comes from the word God spell, right? Moses in the Old Testament uses a staff,
Okay.
right? So people have been conflating aspects of the old religions, the
Mm,
pre-Moses religions, you might say, or the pre-Christian
mm,
religions,
mm, mm.
into the inculcation of how they speak about God.
Correct.
Right? I mean, in the Old Testament, God has a body. He can walk, he can be seen, he can be unseen. It's a very interesting dynamic. And so when I was inspired to write about uh, the divine in my own way, with
Mm,
the virtues constellation, what is happening is the gods in my book have already taken over the World Bank. They've taken over the IMF. They are the reason for all bad in the universe,
mm.
right? So as a Christian, you can relate to that. You could say, yeah, of course, if these, they must have tricked humanity, right? If you ever read Paradise Lost,
Yeah.
John Milton has the ancient gods as versions of fallen angels and things of that nature.
Mm, mm.
And my senior thesis at Princeton, when I was writing it, was to be about the Book of Enoch and how angels were interpreted as these gods, the angel of metallurgy, the angel of song, the angel of this.
Mm, mm, mm.
So there's a lot of ways that if you look at some of the things that are not in Torah or not in Old Testament or not in the
Mm.
Gospels that are outside that things that people used to subscribe to when they were Christian.
Correct.
The Nag Hammadi tests, Desert Sea, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm obsessed with the past. I'm obsessed with this notion that we can't ever really escape what we've created. And humanity has created these gods to be problem solvers for themselves. And
Yes.
I think literature can work that way, right? I mean, obviously, I think the tension for any Christian who says, I love to read this, but I don't want it to offend my spirituality or my sensibility. I would say this, I would say that it shouldn't because when you look at the themes of this book and you look at the themes of good writing, you're going to find hints of how the kingdom lives in me as it lives in you too, right?
Mm.
You're going to find hints of truth. And I think, as any Christian can say, obviously, that truth is verified and embodied by Christ,
Of
right?
course, yes.
That truth is still something where I can refer to you to where Jesus is going to be apprehended by the Romans, right? And he kisses Judas on the cheek, and he
mm,
tells him something. Well, I have found a similar story in another religion where a father god is seeing his son, who is the god of light in that religion, go to the afterlife, be apprehended in a different way.
mm,
And he goes and he whispers something in his ear. So what is that telling you? It is the story of a father-like being having mercy on another being, saying, I know that you've done me wrong. I know that things are not good. I know that there is guilt in the world and shame and bad
mm,
things.
mm,
But let
mm,
me tell you something. I am invincible. So whatever is whispered between them is a story of what all fathers should say to their sons. And that's the crux of the story,
mm,
right?
mm,
It's not about the gods. It's about the humanity. It's about a father to a son to his friends, lovers. What is love? What is romance? All those types of questions. And it relates to my own story with my own father, my complications with my father and his legacy. And my father died when I was 22.
okay.
So this is a love letter to this is an ode to his journey and his places where he could go and places where he could not go.
Mm, mm. Wow. Yeah, so in other words, this Christian is could be you. You
Yeah,
could be Christian.
in some ways,
In
yes.
some ways. Okay. So
Yeah.
now there's a part where you mentioned that Christian was bipolar. Okay. So what role does mental health play in the story, particularly through Christian's struggle with
Right.
bipolar disorder? Yeah.
Right. So I have a YouTube channel that I've started called Myth Mental Health, where
Okay.
I discuss how how the power in ancient stories can
Mm,
help us be a better ourselves in our mental capacities.
mm, mm,
And it's a little different than psychology because psychology obviously is kind of more agnostic or atheist.
mm, mm,
Um, Christian in this story is confronting the fact that he's been told that everything he thinks, and when you are diagnosed, I've had an anxiety condition for most of my life. When you are diagnosed with something like psychosis, the first thing you think of is how can I trust myself ever again? And then you think, how can anyone else trust me?
mm.
Right? And
Correct.
then how do you trust the world around you? All your
Mm,
instincts are telling you to go right, and everyone you know is telling you, no, you need to come
mm.
back left,
Correct.
right? But I think it's kind of like um, the ecstaticism of God.
Mm,
It's that it's like when Enoch first lays eyes on God when in the story, and he's just shuttered with white and shocked and cannot behold it, right? Christian has been too stretched. He's seen too much, and his bipolarness is a disorder from that experience.
mm,
His bipolar is a result of the conflict within him of being a spiritual warrior, you might say,
mm,
a character with deep spiritual power to
mm,
tap in to that world. But that world is chaotic, and that world is not meant to be tapped into without teaching, right?
mm, mm,
Without a guide, right? Without a lesson plan. When I think about Jesus, I think about the times when I would sit with my grandmother and talk about him as a teacher, right? Because she always wanted me to teach college and high school, which I eventually did. And she talks about how it's the power of word, right? The
mm,
world starts with logos, with the
mm,
word, right? And the word, something invisible, creates animation and power. And sometimes we get lost on that track.
mm,
Our
mm,
own words are negative to ourselves. In the Stoic model, we say more negative to ourselves than we say to other people. We
mm.
care more in imagination than we do in reality. We
Correct.
suffer more in imagination than we do in reality.
Mm,
So he is dealing with that as a young man in college. And in college, in America at least, statistics show that when people do manifest some form of mental illness, mental
mm,
distress, it is around the age of 21, 22. These are 2 years where you're finishing up college mostly. You have the stress of papers, theses, capstones, and everybody is scared to leave the bubble.
Mm.
See what I'm saying? So
Yeah, yeah, correct.
it's a reality break, and it's one where you better remember what got you there uh, before you leave. And
That's so,
sometimes people are not able to do that.
so almost like your brain goes into shock kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So in other words, from my understanding, the bipolar is a circumstance of not uh it's an uneducated emotion.
Yes. That's a very good way of putting it.
Okay, because of the fact that you tap into certain things that are higher than you, and
Mhm.
then the result is being in between where you do not know who you are or where you're
Right.
going at the same
Right.
time. So it's a state, in other words, a state of confusion.
Yes.
I know, yeah. Go ahead. You were saying
It's a state of high stress confusion.
high stress confusion. Yeah. In the Christian arena, there's a lot of debates when it comes to bipolar. Uh,
Really?
Yeah, well, it's two ways. Obviously, it's called it's a mental or what we would call chemical imbalance. Okay, where
Yes.
somebody suddenly changes completely. They're one person this minute and there's another person the next. But in our study of divinity, it's also uh, been translated as possession sometimes. They say it
Mm.
may be an influence of
Something.
demonic
Yeah.
demonic influence because
Mm.
of the fact that it hasn't really yet been diagnosed and there isn't a medical solution for it. There's a way
Mm.
that it can be suppressed and I think a person can be helped to live with it, but there isn't a way out of it.
Mm.
And this is from on the Christian debates. And in other words, the only way out is through some form of deliverance, spiritual deliverance,
Mm.
because of the fact that medically they haven't said that one can take a pill and within a certain period of time you would be back to normal again.
Right.
Obviously, there's methods that are being
Mm.
used where people go through some psychosocial therapy and they kind of start to have a way where they can cope with it and they can kind of uh, minimize the reaction time and things like that. But yeah, so that's where when I say debate, that's where there's a bit of speculation. Is it spiritual? Is it mental? Mental? Is it what? Yeah, and then I would agree with you when you say it's an onset from some form of trauma or sudden engagement. Yeah, sudden engagement in an arena which you are not prepared for. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, in other words, yeah. Now when
If
we
you
talk
think about
about,
it,
sorry,
okay.
go ahead, go ahead.
My professor, Cornell West, when I was in Princeton, used to say we are going through constant change, paideia, as
Mm,
we go from womb to tomb, right? And you can look at that in a Gnostic way, a
mm,
kind of pre-organized church Christian way,
mm, mm,
right? Where you say that God is preparing you for the next life, and in that
mm,
next life, it will be wondrous and amazing, but you need sight. And in some ways, you need blindness. You need a little bit of both,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You need to be prepared by life for what is to come next, any revelation or things of that nature,
correct.
right? If you think of bipolar, even in the New Age community, they're talking about how bipolar is parts of the brain are experiencing the world in a sense of awe. You're a creative person. You're a very smart person. You're an intelligent person. You might even be a very open-minded person,
Correct.
but you delve into thought processes and thought speed at a level that is also a detriment to you,
Mm, mm,
right? That you have this incredible processor, this
mm,
Intel Pentium processor in your brain that others can't always relate to,
mm.
and it's a little cracked, it's haywire. You can't contain that. I've always believed that God does not give us things that we cannot handle.
Correct.
eventually. But we need to, and in the book, we talk about the dynamics between the science and the spirituality of it.
Excellent. Lastly, before we come to a close, what I would want to hear from you is that the two differences between how you do the comparison between the whole issue of astrology and mythology. Yeah, because I know there's a lot of questions. Astrology has become a questionable issue when it comes to obviously the Christian faith, and
Mm,
then obviously the same mythology. So how do you balance the two? What is, well, let me just say, what is the difference between the two, and
mhm.
how do you synergize them? Because I know obviously astrology is in sense the constellation where mythology gets its signals or its alignments from.
Yes, yeah.
But I would like to hear it from your research. What is it? How would you put it as an author? What, or as the person who did the actual research with an educated explanation? Yeah.
Sure. So the first astrologies come from Sumer. We know that they were looking at the stars for stories and inspiration, looking at when disasters would happen, like looking at falling stars or looking when eclipses would happen. We
Mm,
know that in South America they were doing that early on, and in Egypt or Kemet, Nubia, Meroe, places like that. When it
mm,
comes to the Greeks redefine it in their own stories and mythoses, right? Cancer is Hera, right? Sagittarius could be a representation of not only Artemis, but the different characters, right? So they
mm.
root it in the context of storytelling.
Okay.
And I think all of us have a story to tell, and all of us are stories ourselves.
Mm,
And
mm,
that's what's powerful about it. When I think about how I use it with mythology,
mm.
mythology is something that is not true in the literal sense, but is true in a metaphorical sense. It teaches a
Okay.
lesson, like an Aesop's fable, right? And I believed in this story that what if the gods saw astrology as something beyond them, but
Mm,
something that they could harness and control, because all things are out for power. And power can be used for good or can be used for evil, obviously.
mm, mm,
And these gods in my book are drunk. They're drunk off of something they took that has turned them maniacal,
mm.
turned them into who they've
Correct.
become. It's
Okay.
very similar to the story in the Christian context of you could say a fallen angel or something like that. They've been corrupted in their thought processes.
Mm, mm, mm.
And I believe that astrology is a lens of looking at any religion. Because if I'm a Libra,
Mm.
I have certain characteristics. It's a descriptor. And I think it's an extension and descriptor of the power of God. I don't think it's a denial or it's a conflict of it. Even if you look in the Bible, if you look at the first Gospels, I mean Matthew and Mark, very, very much talking about the equinoctial power of Christ. Christ is the sun in the center of these journeys, these points that represent astrological markers or milestones,
Mm,
right?
mm.
He meets a backbiter like Cancer. He meets the balance scales of Libra, so he has to confront the law,
Correct.
right? There are many points in which the authors of the New Testament are using astrology to give Jesus a journey that is also descriptive of his tale, but also empowers his tale as he moves into showing you why he is superior to, in the Christian context, superior to other gods that have come before, right?
Excellent.
When he is in the storm and he says, I am the storm, right? And he calms the storm, right? Think of how many storm gods there are in other religions, right? He is
Yeah.
saying that I am both the plentiful, Pisces, right? I
Mm,
make the fish. When will you see me again? The age of Aquarius,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
But he also says, but I can be the wrath of the storm as well, right?
Okay.
There's a dichotomy there and there's a balance there,
Mm,
Libra, that does not exist in other gods. So that's why the Jesus argument for worshiping him is that I am superior in all ways, and that's why you follow me. And I think in this book, you're gonna get that dynamic of discussion, and you're gonna feel that at the end that Christian is not replacing Christ in anybody's heart or model, that Christian is simply a version of a world that needs that kind of energy, that kind of vibe from someone.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think this is very interesting and educational, and I'll definitely be looking out to see how I can get a copy of that book. Could you please tell the audience how they can get a copy or where they can get a copy? Just
Sure. Well, firstly, you can follow me on Instagram at Professor Jaws. That's Jaws. You can go to the link in my bio, and I have all my links. I will be sharing the link with you, Hans, so that you can post it. But you can get it on Amazon.com at Reborn Virtues Constellation,
Okay,
Barnes and Nobles as well. And there's an audio book coming out. So if you are a person who says, I don't have time to sit and read, but I'd like to listen to it,
great.
by the end of June to the beginning of July, I will be coming out with the audio book, and I will definitely be sharing that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Justin. I'm stretching out another invitation because on our last two discussions, we've been talking about the West and Africa and all that.
Yeah.
Uh, Recently, there's been a lot of activities happening in America. We're looking at fires, we're looking at
Yeah.
sudden economic strain, and then the government is going through its own turmoil with the
Mhm.
change of leaders and the debates concerning who's the right leader, who's not the right leader. And then
Right.
also the question being that is America truly the superpower that is in control of the world?
Mm.
Or the third world, and
Right.
what are we saying about those they call the 13 families or
Mm.
whatever they call them? So there's all these notions, or should we say rumors and news that we keep on reading. But so I would like us to just maybe have a session where we can kind of identify the truths in what's really happening. And also, uh, as you've heard, there's also been prophecies about the issue of America being the Babylon that the Bible talks about, in the sense that there's supposed to be some form of judgment coming to a
Sure.
land which has influenced the world in a certain way. So,
Right.
yeah, so we will talk about when we'll advertise and post when we are going to have this discussion. But I just wanted to put it out there so that you can um, extend another session with us so that we can discuss through this.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great, great. Yeah. So thank you. This has been Dr. Hans on Let's Talk. We will see you next time when we can have another hot topic. Yeah. So see you soon and God bless you. Thank you.